No Skattebo? No problem. Sam Leavitt just showed you that he can win you football games all by himself.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows. You can stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Of course, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. New customers, you can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win that $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in and happy Victory Monday. It's nice to be back on a Monday. It's been a crazy last few weeks, but you know what? We're here. We are ready to celebrate another win as the Sun Devils improve to 7-2. 7-2. Your boy said the Sun Devils were going 7-5 this year. That was also over the entire season. By this point in time, I had ASU at 5-4. 5-4. Quite different. They're also taking care of business and doing a great job in doing so. And ASU, they've just been great, man. They are playing above their expectations. Jalen Strong, Sun Devil legend, compared this team to the 2014 team and said that, they came in with lower expectations and they're just continuing to blow past that with each passing week. And, I can't disagree. Now, that team, that 2014 team did feel like a legit playoff contender, and unfortunately everything ran off the rails when they went to Corvallis. This team, they're not quite in control of their destiny. But we're going to talk about that later on in the week. Right now, we got to talk about how ASU keeps winning and how they're perfect at home. I don't know if you knew that. ASU was 5-0 at home this year. And there's been some good wins. They were able to take down Kansas, Utah, and now UCF in clutch fashion. They absolutely dominated Wyoming, and they took down, Mississippi State at the beginning of the year. But this was a fun game, and it was another game where you could see that maybe ASU wasn't playing to the best of their capabilities. They were still playing good football. And at the end of the day, that's really all that you can ask out of these guys is for them to play good football. And they've done that. It starts with Sam Leavitt. As we talk about the good from this game, it starts with Sam Leavitt. Leavitt has continued to shine. One of my bold predictions going into this game was Leavitt was going to build off of the performance that he had last week against Oklahoma State. Against Oklahoma State, he completed 69% of his passes, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I said Leavitt is going to build off of that. It may not be statistically as good, but it's still going to be a very good performance. And lo and behold, it was. 64% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 161 yards. Yeah, it may not have been 300 yards. In fact, it was just a little more than half of that. Still just as impressive. This was a good performance from Sam Leavitt. Keep in mind, this performance was without Cam Skattebo. Skattebo was out. The pressure was on Leavitt to perform. He stepped up to the occasion, and he performed. Outstanding performance from Sam Leavitt. I don't see how you could picture it any other way. And to me, what he showed is that you can win because of Sam Leavitt, not just with Sam Leavitt. There's a perception that as of now, Levit is like the game manager and he just needs to be on the field and be smart and not turn the ball over and this, that, and the other. I don't think that's the case. I think what we're seeing from Sam Leavitt is that you are entirely capable of putting the ball in his hands and saying, hey, man, we need you to go win this football game. We need you to have a clutch drive, all that good stuff. He did it. He had the go-ahead drive for ASU and tossed a beautiful ball to Jordan Tyson. He had, earlier in the game, a teardrop pass to Jordan Tyson that was just absolutely phenomenal to look at. It was a dime. He was throwing good passes all game. If you had shown me this Sam Leavitt in week 1 against Wyoming, if you took the game film from this game and showed it to me in week 1, I would have been like, oh, wow, he looks really good next year. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me that was Sam Leavitt just later on in the season. That's mind-blowing to me. And yet here he is, playing 10 times better than what he did back then. And of course, the biggest aspect of that has to be the Sam Leavitt to Jordan Tyson connection. It's quarterback 1 to wide receiver 1. I talk about it every week, so I don't want to keep talking about it over and over again because it is repetitive, but it's legit, and it's one of the best combinations ASU has had in quite some time. In fact, off the top of my head, I would put it up there with Daniels to Ayuk. It's truly been that good. The defense, they have a clutch factor. I understand it was up and down. They gave up a lot of yards in this game. They surrendered 31 points, but they stepped up when they needed to step up. Brian Ward is the master of adjustments, of second half adjustments, of second or third drive adjustments. If the game plan doesn't start off immediately working the way that Brian Ward might want it to, well, then we're just going to pivot and we're going to try this instead. And then boom, that works. It's one of the reasons that ASU has won games this year is because the defense has been able to change what wasn't working and turn it into what is working. Having that ability is just massive. Having that ability to have a coach that can pivot the way that he does, amazing. Of course, you also had LT Welch with an interception. Not just an interception, a pick six. It was the craziest scenario. So if you didn't watch the game, let me paint a picture for you. ASU does a kickoff. And this UCF kick returner kind of misjudges the ball. And you could say he muffed it, but he's in the end zone, so you're not worried about it. No one from ASU was even close to him. And it wasn't the muff of like the crowd's going crazy. It was just kind of like I misjudged it kind of thing. So he picks it up and then he stares at the coverage. And you're sitting there and you were like, are you going to kneel? And then he starts running. And you're like, what are you doing, my brother in football? And he starts running and he tries to get cute. And he's tackled at the half-yard line, barely avoided the safety. Very next play, UCF tries to run a slant route to get out of the half-yard line. And Dylan Rizk, the UCF quarterback, puts a little too much air underneath this ball. And LT Welch just picks it off and has the shortest pick six ever. The yardage, I'm sure, was closer to 5 or 10 yards, but I mean, it was only a half yard to the end zone. It was terrific. It was clutch. And it was a play that got the stadium back into the game. It was huge. Massive, massive turning point for ASU. There wasn't a bigger turning point, though, than the last thing that we're going to highlight here, and that's that special teams made a huge play. Now, I'm not talking about field goals. No. I am talking about punt coverage. Richie, what could punt coverage do? I'm glad you asked. Because, again, if you didn't watch this game, let me paint a picture for you. ASU's defense is able to step up after they gave up a long drive to UCF previously. And UCF was just chunk play. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. The next drive, they're able to force a 3-and-out. They go to punt. And for whatever reason, UCF does not pick up Martell Hughes, true freshman linebacker, on the not a blitz, but going after the ball, essentially. They don't pick him up. Martell runs as fast as he can. Dude was a bat out of hell and gets to the ball. And it was one of those where you're watching it and you're like, this is either going to be a block or it's going to be roughing the punter, because my goodness, he got there fast and he blocks it. And then Montana Warren, redshirt freshman, picks it up and takes it to the house. Game tied 7-7. Similar to that pick six, it brought the stadium back into it. Electrifying play. Dare I say, the biggest play of the night. That was what you needed. Because we've seen this year from ASU that one or two bad drives and mistakes can sometimes demoralize them. We saw it against Cincinnati. This is a team that needs to just settle down and be able to work through the good and the bad, but they become so much better when they have those electrifying plays. And that was exactly that. It was an electrifying play. Everyone was bought in, and instantly the tide started to turn in the favor of ASU. Coming up next on the pod, we're going to talk about the bad things, because, of course, this wasn't a perfect game, and there's certainly stuff that ASU needs to work on. We're going to go through that coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to take on the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. You can make that on anything, too. You can do a money line, pick a team straight up. You can take a team to cover a spread. You can even take a player to hit some kind of prop. Are they going to score a touchdown? More or less than the yards? Any bet you make that's $5 or more gets you $150 in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is also going to need you everything you need to place those live bets in the NFL all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join the day. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in and making us your first view of the day or your first listen. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. All right, let's get back into our conversation. Wasn't all good. There was some bad in this game. First of all, and I wouldn't say this was oh my God, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. But without Cam Skattebo, this was a step back for the run game. Now, it wasn't horrible. You still managed 99 rushing yards, and you got to account for, was it 2 sacks of Sam Leavitt? 2 sacks of Sam Leavitt, which I would imagine he would have had closer to 40 yards, which obviously would have put you over the century mark. Kyson Brown, rock solid, 18 carries, 73 yards, nothing crazy, a little over 4 yards per carry. Take it and run. DeCarlos Brooks, only 3 carries and 4 yards. Not much of a factor, and no one else got carries. No Alton McCaskill, no Jason Brown. That was a little surprising to me, but they also really like Kyson Brown. So that is not a surprise to see how much they want to get him involved in the run game. This is a drastically, significantly different rushing attack without Cam Skattebo. They go from averaging right around 200 yards a game to under 100. It was also 32 carries, by the way. So that was well under 4 yards a carry. That is barely 3 yards per carry at 3.1, and that's rounding up. There was not a lot of efficiency in the run game. And again, you got to take into account that Levit did have some negative yards from sacks, but even if you account for those, he's right around 4 yards per carry. I'm not sure how many negative yards he took in that game. DeCarlos Brooks obviously didn't do anything. Kyson, he was solid. He was quality. You see the reason why ASU likes him so much. There's room to grow. Second thing, we have got to have better protection for Sam Leavitt. It's been an up and down offensive line. The tackles are the most frustrating part for me. The interior, pretty rock solid. This is a group that I have just gone through so many different emotions with. A couple of weeks ago, I asked on the show, I said, have I been too harsh on the offensive line? Because they had strung together good performances. This was not their strongest performance. And it was one of those games where you needed them to be incredibly good because you didn't have Skattebo to take some of the pressure off of Sam Leavitt. He was only sacked twice, sure, but he was under pressure all night. And post-game press conference, Kenny Dillingham even told us, he was like, yeah, at some point Sam was seeing ghosts, which it wasn't indicative on the offensive line when he said he was seeing ghosts. It was more of like, hey, he's got to be able to settle down in the pocket and trust himself. And that's hard to do when you're constantly pressured. So Kenny's not throwing the offensive line under the boat or under the bus. I think that they have to get better. The defense. I said that they stepped up when they needed to, and Brian Ward made adjustments. That does not mean they played an elite game. RJ Harvey, the Big 12 leading rusher coming into this game, 25 carries, 127 yards, 3 touchdowns. Keep in mind, he had under 50 yards and under 3 yards per carry in the first half of this game. They gave him the clamps. Second half, completely different story. Just so many big runs. 26 yards, that was the longest. It was just chunk plays. Lots of first down yardages on 1st and 10s. Like, they had no answer for him. And he was pretty much the ground game. Miles Montgomery, 4 carries, 34 yards, very good. Javarius Johnson had 1 carry for 20 yards. But the bulk of the work came from RJ Harvey, and he was terrific. He was terrific. With what you got out of him, he was one of the biggest reasons for your success. In the passing game, ASU got eaten up in the secondary as well. UCF did not take a lot of shots down the field. They really didn't. So much of what they were doing in this game was attacking underneath and attacking the sidelines. My goodness, did they kill you on sidelines. ASU was playing a few yards off. And after a while, you're sitting there and you're like, you feel like you need to change something up. You need to press them off the line or something. But the adjustments weren't made. So Dylan Rizk, a redshirt freshman quarterback, had an offense that was very simplified for him to have success. And he had success because he's getting his ball out to the sidelines. He's putting some spin on it, getting it to his veteran receivers, and they're moving the ball. With RJ Harvey doing what he's doing, they had plenty of success, whether it was on the ground or through the air. They did whatever they wanted to do, and that's where they're just going to continue to be effective on offense. And they are 4-6. They have to win out if they are going to be a bowl team this year, but they play West Virginia and Utah. So there's a very good chance that they win out for the remainder of the year, which would obviously be huge for them. And it's not going to be easy, but I do think that this is a very realistic opportunity for this team, especially if Rizk continues to take steps forward. Last thing I want to bring up, and this is way more of an observation than it is a bad thing. ASU did not attempt a field goal in this game. They didn't attempt a field goal last week either. Has Kenny Dillingham given up on field goal tries? For what it's worth, they haven't needed to. They're 2-0 since returning from the bye week, and they're winning games without field goals. Against Oklahoma State, 42 points. That is 6 PATs. This past weekend, 35 points, 5 PATs. They've nailed all their PATs. That's awesome. That also was not the weakness of this team when it came to special teams. ASU has missed 2 extra points all year long. They are fine when it comes to kicking extra points. It's the field goals that they struggle to do. They have not attempted any. Now, have they been placed in situations where they have to attempt some? Not as much because the offense has been efficient, but you do see ASU even more aggressive on third and fourth downs than we previously saw from them a month ago. ASU is way more aggressive, and for a team that likes analytics, it is very noteworthy that ASU is staying as aggressive as they are. And personally, I love it. I love the fact that Kenny Dillingham is not afraid to go for it on difficult situations. There were like 4th and 6 that Kenny was taking a look at. That's typically not something you're looking at doing. 4th and 6, 4th and 5 or more. Pretty suspect unless you have to go for it. If you're in a fourth and go situation, totally understand. When it's early in the game and you don't have to, that's ballsy. Now, I appreciate it. I love that Kenny's got that confidence in his offense to keep going, but you do wonder if ASU was kicking 80% on their field goals, if you would see a little more trust for your kickers to come out. More of an observation, for sure. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some takeaways from this game and hand out some game balls. It's the best part of the podcast coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let me talk to you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature for themselves. It's Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier than before. Game Time Picks is going to filter out the fluff and show you incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With Game Time Picks, it's going to make that curation process even easier. You can save more money, not just on sports, but check out comedy events, theater events, and more. All-in pricing is a great feature as well. It's going to show you the total upfront. There's no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly how much you're paying. Get a seat view. Get a panoramic view of your seat in the app so you know what to expect when you arrive. Do it before you buy your tickets. Lowest price guarantee. Absolutely the best feature here. Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off your purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. One last time, wherever you're getting your shows, like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications, and you'll get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Takeaways. I got 4 takeaways for you guys. Takeaway number 1. Sam Leavitt, he's arrived. And he will be able to take ASU as far as ASU can go. When I say that, and again, like I said, we'll talk about this later on in the week in far more detail. ASU doesn't necessarily control their own fate for the remainder of the year. But if a couple of things swing their way, you're not out of it to go to the Big 12 championship. That's insane to think about. ASU is only 2 losses in the conference. Ahead of them, BYU is undefeated, and Colorado only has 1 loss. So what you need is BYU to get to 2 losses, Colorado to get to 2 losses, preferably 3. Now for BYU, you need them to lose at some point. You play them in 2 weeks. By the way, depending on what happens this weekend against Kansas State and for BYU's game, whoever they are up against, I'm going to be looking it up while I talk about this. Whoever BYU is up against this weekend, if BYU is able to take down Kansas at home in Provo, go to 10-0, and then ASU gets the upset win over Kansas State this weekend and is 8-2, and they host the undefeated number 1 team in the conference. College game day is going to have to seriously consider coming to Tempe. Just saying. But they need BYU to lose 2 of their last 3 games. Honestly, they just need to beat BYU. Win out. You cannot afford a loss for the rest of the year. If you do, then you're out of it. Like 3 losses, that's too much to overcome in the conference. You win out, you're 10-2. If Colorado can lose at least 1 more game, potentially 2 more games, you would also be beating Kansas State this weekend. You have a very real shot to go to the Big 12 championship game. I don't know how the tiebreakers work, so I don't know if everyone finishes with the same record. If Iowa State, Colorado, or Arizona State would get an edge over the other, that's something I'd have to look into, but it is entirely possible, as Joe Rogan would say, for ASU to get there. And Sam Leavitt can take them there. As far as everything else that is not within his control, we'll see what happens. But for winning football games and for ASU getting to the promised land, Sam Leavitt can get him there by himself. Takeaway number 2, Cam Skattebo changes the entire dynamic of the running game. Like, completely different running team when Cam Skattebo is on the field versus when Cam Skattebo is not on the field. It's not a surprise. What is a little surprising is how big of a drop-off it is. It's a huge drop-off. Skattebo is so dynamic for the Sun Devils team. And to go from averaging about 200 yards a game to under 100 yards a game, or under 100 yards a game, under 100 yards in this game, and barely 3 yards a carry. That's huge. Now, the good thing is, like we said, Sam Leavitt appears to be able to make up for that because he threw 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, completed 64% of his passes without the best football player on this team playing next to him, who is supposed to make life easier for Sam Leavitt. And that's true in week 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially week 5 and 6. But now that you are, what is it? Week 10, week 11, something like that. I think this was week 10. ASU has no problem winning football games right now, and it's because of how good Sam Leavitt has become. Takeaway number 3, the pass rush, it's not elite. I was hoping going into the year that ASU was going to be a much better pass rushing unit than they are. It's been fine. They've got 18 sacks. They were able to collect 3 sacks this past week against UCF. Pretty good because they only had 20 sacks allowed on the year, and 10 of them had come from KJ Jefferson in the first month of the year. So they became a much better offensive line when they moved on from Jefferson. They got it done in this game. Jacob Rich Kongaika, CJ Fight, and Prince Dorbaugh were the 3 guys responsible for bringing down Dylan Rizk. They got there when they needed to. It gets there when it's on the line. I don't know if we're going to have a game the rest of the year, 3 games left. I don't know if there's going to be a 5-sack game or a 6-sack game. We might get the last 3 games 2 or less sacks. It's just not the unit I hoped it would be. But those sacks could come up in incredibly important situations. That's where this defensive line is. Final takeaway before we hand out some game balls. The defense, I wouldn't call them bend but don't break. I really wouldn't. I would say that they rise to the occasion. When a game is on the line, this defense steps up. We've seen it all year. They just did it against UCF. They did it against Kansas when Kansas was making a comeback. They did it against Utah when Utah had a final drive and they were trying to go down the field. We saw it against, I guess you could say Oklahoma State. They really just killed them in that game. I don't know if I would classify that as like this elite defensive game, I guess. Mississippi State, they stepped up. Texas State, they stepped up. The defense has been making plays all year long, particularly when ASU absolutely needed them to do it. They rise to the occasion. So no, I do not call them bend but don't break. I don't think that's fair. I say they rise to the occasion. All right, let's hand out some game balls. 2 on offense, 2 on defense. Number 1, Sam Leavitt. How could he not get a game ball? He won you this game. Like, you had great plays from defense and special teams, but if Sam Leavitt is not playing, you are not winning this football game. He played out of his mind. He was tossing dimes in this game. In fact, he only had 161 passing yards. There was at least 50 yards that were left on the field because of a dropped pass from Jake Smith, which I think could have been a 70-yard touchdown. He had the defender beat, and the defender was diving for Smith. So when Smith catches that ball, there's a chance he just shakes off the defender and takes off for what? God, that would have been close to like an 80-yard touchdown because Sam was throwing that from the end zone. And then there was like a 30-yard catch that was dropped by Jordan Tyson. Consecutive plays, by the way. Easily could have been over 200 yards with another touchdown if Jake Smith catches that. But, it didn't come to be. That's okay. He still had 3 touchdowns, including the go-ahead to Jordan Tyson. Speaking of Jordan Tyson, that's game ball number 2. Jordan Tyson, 7 catches, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. He continues to be the life force of this passing attack. Since the first bye week, he is gone. 6 catches, 76 yards, 2 touchdowns. 5 catches, 84 yards, 1 touchdown. 6 catches, 108 yards, no touchdowns. 8 catches, 81 yards, 1 touchdown. And 7 catches, 99 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He has been the best friend of Sam Leavitt. He's targeted legitimately close to 10 times a game, and he's worth it. And he steps up, and he is wide receiver 1. Having him on the field, it's terrific what he is able to provide for you as your wide receiver 1 and as Sam Leavitt's best friend. And he had a perfect touchdown from a perfect throw in the third quarter, I believe. And then he had the game winner, which was a perfectly placed pass. And Levit was able to get the inside of the coverage, pulls it in, ASU goes ahead, and they don't give up the lead for the rest of the game. Jordan Tyson, game ball number 2. Game ball number 3, LT Welch. Welch was someone that going into the year, I was hyping up as like slam dunk corner 1. I was caught up in the hype that he had as being a former like 4-star / 5-star when he had transferred. I was totally sucked in on that. That's on me. I also did not make it out to training camp this past year, so I didn't get to see how good Keith Abney and Javen Robinson looked in camp. So I hyped up LT Welch, and I had to understand that he more than likely was not going to live up to these insane expectations that I had for him, and that's fine. This was a great game for him. He played really well. He had a great game last week. He's breaking up passes. The pick 6, that energized this team, which is why he gets game ball. The last game ball, I'm making 2 guys split it. And that's because they are the reason that ASU got back into this game as far as I'm concerned. Martell Hughes and Montana Warren are each getting a game ball here. Hughes, a true freshman, made probably the biggest play of the game when he blocked that punt early in the game and got ASU back into it. Montana Warren capitalized on that big play. Redshirt freshman, by the way, scooped it and scored. A freshman and a redshirt freshman. That's the future of your team. And they made great plays. Kenny Dillingham said it perfectly in postgame. He said, it shouldn't matter if you are buried on the depth chart or if you're relegated to special teams only or whatever. When you're called upon, you make a big play. That's exactly what Martell did. That's exactly what Montana did. Them being able to make the big plays when they were counted on and had their opportunities, that, ladies and gentlemen, is why they get the game ball. Kenny said he gave Montana Warren the game ball. Well, guess what? Martell Hughes is getting one too. Him and Montana Warren share the love. That's my takeaways. That's my good. That's my bad. And that is my game balls. What did you guys think of this game? Was this Was this an elite game? Was it an elite win? Was it a great comeback? Was it a bad win? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And of course, a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. As always, I appreciate you guys. We will be back tomorrow as we grade this win from ASU. We're going to look at the offense, we're going to look at the defense, and we're going to look at Kenny Dillingham, at Marcus Arroyo, and at Brian Ward. Talk about how they did. It's a typical grading scale of 1 to 100. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about that, and I will see you there. Until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.